So, how much meat did mince pies used to contain? Well, a lot more than you might expect. Today, mince pies are sweet, fruity treats we associate with Christmas, but in Tudor times, they were far from that. These pies were packed with meat, veal or mutton, and a blend of spices, dried fruits, and even rose water. The combination was a reflection of Tudor tastes, where sweet and savory often mingled in surprising ways. Now, this is my first time baking on camera, so consider this an experiment as much as a recipe. I'm a historian, not a baker, but I've always been fascinated by the history of food and the ways recipes connect us to the past. I'll be attempting to recreate a Tudor mince pie using a recipe from the Good Housewives Treasurie, published in 1588. It's old, vague, and a little intimidating, but hey, what could possibly go wrong, right? So this could go brilliantly or terribly, but either way, it's going to be fun, I hope. I know Max Miller from Tasting History has already explored Victorian mince pies, which are closer to the ones we know today, even though they still have meat. By the way, make sure to check out his video. It's really brilliant. It's just great. But Tudor mince pies, well, they're a whole other story, and I can't wait to see how mine turn out. Let's get into it. Hello, lovely history fans. I'm Dr. Julia Martins, and I'm a historian. Don't be fooled by the apron. I'm much more at home in a library than I am in the kitchen. But I am fascinated by the history of everyday life, which includes, of course, food. And although I'm not a cook or a chef, I love cooking and historical recipes, obviously, plus eating. But I guess that goes without saying. So recipes, whether for cosmetics, for medicines, for the Philosopher's Stone, or in this case, mince pies, are an ever-intriguing kind of historical source, and I'm excited to introduce you to today's recipe. Now, before we get started, I would like to remind you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy it. If you are feeling particularly generous, it would be lovely if you became a patron and joined my community on Patreon. It makes all the difference. Now, let's get cooking, shall we? Like their medieval predecessors, the Tudors loved their spices, which were symbols of status and wealth. Plus, they helped to preserve food for longer, and made it delicious, of course. But nutmeg, cinnamon, and cloves weren't just about flavor. They showed you could afford the exotic imports from far-off lands. Mince pies were often served at feasts where they embodied the perfect mix of savory and sweet. Here is the original recipe I'm using today. To make mince pies, take your veal and parboil it a little, or mutton, then set it to cooling. And when it is cold, take 3 pounds of suet to a leg of mutton, or 4 pounds to a fillet of veal, and then mince them small by themselves, or together whether you will. Then take to season them half an ounce of nutmegs, half an ounce of cloves and mace, half an ounce of cinnamon, a little pepper, as much salt as you think will season them, either to the mutton or to the veal. Take 8 yolks of eggs when they be hard, half a pint of rose water full measure, half a pound of sugar, then strain the yolks with the rose water and the sugar and mingle it with your meat. If you have any oranges or lemons, you must take 2 of them and take the peels very thin and mince them very small, and put them in a pound of currants, 6 dates, half a pound of fruits. Lay currants and dates upon the top of your meat. You must take 2 or 3 palm waters or wardens and mince them with your meat. You may make them worse if you will. If you will make good crust, put in 3 or 4 yolks of eggs, a little rose water, and a good deal of sugar. Now, as a 21st century home cook, this recipe leaves me with lots of questions. Recipe books published in this period assumed a lot of their readers. Tudor recipes didn't just tell you how to cook things, they assumed you already knew, and a lot. This one's basically saying, you've got this, while leaving out half the instructions. And yes, this is also true for recipes for medicines. So let's just be thankful this one doesn't have, a dash of arsenic or hemlock. So Tudor kitchens could be a little wild, right? Clearly. So worst case scenario, I just won't serve these carnivore mince pies to my guests, and Pancake, my cat, will be pleased to help out and, just gobble them up. We'll see. Okay, so this recipe calls for veal or mutton, suet, which I always find a bit weird, but I know it's very popular in baking, rosewater, sugar, and spices, which make the pie smell incredible, like Christmas with a twist, I'm assuming. There's also a curious addition of pomme waters, an old variety of apple. Let's modernize it slightly so we can recreate it in today's kitchen without having to, parboil anything. Thankfully, I know exactly where to find help. Brigitte Webster, the author of Eating with the Tudors and an incredible historian, already did the hard work of adapting this recipe for us in her book. She mentions how the original recipe used a whole, leg of lamb, which weighs between 4 and 6 pounds apparently, and that would be a bit excessive. And so she quoted the ingredients amounts. By the way, I highly recommend checking out her book. It's full of recreated Tudor recipes and explanations about food culture at the time. And make sure to follow her on social media. She always has interesting insights about Tudor gardening, cooking, home decor, etc. Okay, back to the recipe. According to Brigitte, for this modernized recipe, you will need veal or lamb mince, 1 batch of fine pastry, which I've already shaped into tarts here, as you can see, 340 grams suet, which is beef fat for lamb, or 450 for veal, 120 grams of currants, 120 grams of prunes chopped. These are all chopped. We are baking mince pies after all. 120 grams of candied orange and or lemon peel, chopped as well. 1 or 2 dates, chopped again. And 1 or 2 wardens or hard pears, peeled, cored, and chopped. Plus half a teaspoon ground nutmeg, half a teaspoon ground mace, the same for ground cloves, and lastly, ground black pepper to taste. As I've never done this recipe before, I'm going with a rather generous pinch. Plus 2 egg yolks, hard-boiled and chopped. You see a pattern here. And then 60 milligrams rose water, ideally diluted in water. I'm following Brigitte's instructions here, as she knows what she's doing much more than I do. And finally, around 50 grams of sugar. For the pastry, I was a little bit cheeky and I used shop-bought short crust pastry. I'm a historian, not a chef, and this is my first ever cooking video after all. And honestly, if Nadia Hussein says it's fine, who am I to argue? If it's good enough for her, it's definitely good enough for me. Plus, the Tudors probably would have loved the convenience of a ready-made crust if they could have had it. But I did ask Brigitte about the difference between the short crust pastry and the fine pastry that she has in her book, and she said that it's basically eggs. So my version has fewer eggs. So, according to Brigitte, we should mix all solid ingredients in a bowl. Okay, magic change of bowl as I realized that there was no way that my suet was going to fit the other one. But here we are. Now that I have all of this mixed up, there's actually room for the suet to go in. Now I'm going to mix the rose water, egg yolks, and sugar. So here it goes. Hoping I'm doing this correctly. Don't really know what to expect. But yeah, this looks like a weird soup. But it smells like soap, so we'll see. Okay, so now I'm going to mix the two together and then I'll be able to start filling in my pies. Okay, so now I'm ready to start filling my pastry tarts generously. In the Tudor period, this would usually be a big, tall pie rather than the cute small ones we know today. I imagine that for the whole thing not to collapse onto itself, it must have required quite a firm crust. But I'll stick to the smaller ones because that way my friends and family, who I'm hoping are not watching this video and who are coming over this Christmas, might unsuspecting, think that they're adorable and actually eat them. Such a good hostess, aren't I? Oh, and Brigitte reminds us to save some pastry for the lids, but I decided to go with Christmassy stars instead. Okay, now I'm adding my stars to the top. Now, bake it in the oven at medium heat. The recipe didn't include oven temperatures, and I guess we can't blame the Tudors for, not having a thermostat on their wood-fired ovens. But I'm thinking 350 to 400 Fahrenheit or 160 to 200 Celsius. I'm going with 160 degrees. And wait until they're done, which may take as long as 2 hours. Glad I'm not going anywhere today. Oh, and don't forget, if you are covering the pies with a lid, you have to make a few holes for the vapor to escape. If we're going with, a cute little star like I did, then you don't have to worry. While we wait for the mince pies to bake, let's talk about how the Tudors celebrated Christmas. It was a bit more elaborate than, mince pies and mulled wine. And yes, don't worry, I'm not going to talk for the full 2 hours that it takes to bake these pies, but I probably could. In Tudor times, mince pies weren't just food, they carried religious symbolism. They sometimes had an oblong coffin-like shape, which was said to represent the story of the birth of Jesus and the manger. The spices, nutmeg, cloves, and cinnamon, were meant to evoke the gifts of the Magi. So serving a mince pie wasn't just about the food, though it sometimes could be. It was a reflection of Christian faith during the Christmas season. Yes, I did say season. As you may know, and songs like the 12 Days of Christmas remind us, plus, Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. Of course, I couldn't go through a whole video without mentioning Shakespeare. But anyway, as the play reminds us, in Tudor England, Christmas didn't stop after December the 25th. It was actually just the beginning. The 12 days of Christmas were filled with feasting, dancing, games, and plays. The celebrations ended on Twelfth Night, January the 5th, with a big party, sometimes featuring a special 12th night cake. Think of it as a Tudor version of a New Year's bash. Christmas feasts in Tudor England could be extravagant. The centerpiece was often a boar's head, garnished with rosemary and bay leaves. Other delicacies included peacock pies, yes, real peacock, feathers optional but often used, and game birds like swans or geese. Everything was decorated with greenery, though not Christmas trees just yet. And unlike today, the Tudors didn't exchange gifts on Christmas Day. Instead, presents were usually given on New Year's Day. These gifts were often practical items like food or cloth, but for royalty, they could be luxurious items such as jewelry. At court, gift-giving had political connotations and was very public. There was even a list of what everyone gave the king each year. For instance, in 1534, Anne Boleyn gave Henry VIII a silver table fountain designed by the court artist Hans Holbein, which pumped rose water into a basin so that the king could clean his hands in between courses. Yes, the same rose water we're using in this recipe. It was often used as a scent too. That's just in case, you were looking for Christmas gifts inspiration for your loved ones. Unfortunately, I don't have a link to share for this one. In Eating with the Tudors, Brigitte Webster also mentions the historian Peter Brias and his book Cooking and Dining in Tudor and Early Stuart England. According to Brias, mince pies became associated with Christmas in the mid-16th century, so the 1588 recipe that I'm using today was very on trend. These meat pies, like many others of the kind, would be made with leftover meat, usually. If it was mutton, it could be a nod to the shepherds and the nativity story. In his 1573 book, Christmas Husbandly Fare, Thomas Tussler mentions these shred meat pies as a Christmas tradition, along with lots of other foods. He wrote, "Good bread and good drink, brown pudding and souse and good mustard withal, beef, mutton, and pork, shred pies of the best, pig, veal, goose and capon, and turkey well dressed, cheese, apples, and nuts." Yes, even turkey was already making an appearance. And of course, shred pies are basically mince pies. The poet Robert Herrick also wrote of the pies. "Come, guard this night the Christmas pie, that the thief, though never so sly, with his fleshed hooks don't come nigh to catch it." Now, the mention of, flesh hooks might bring up some unpleasant imagery, especially if you've seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which unfortunately for me, I did as a traumatized 12-year-old. But let's not dwell on that for too long. A lot of Christmas traditions changed with the Reformation. Post-Reformation, by the 17th century, holy cakes were reinvented and renamed as sort of regional specialties, pruned of their religious associations. But that's a story for another day. For now, let's talk about what happened to mince pies themselves. Recipes like the one I'm making today remained popular until the 18th century. By then, sugar had become cheaper and more accessible, and mince pies gradually crossed the line from a sweet and savory combo to purely sweet. They also weren't exclusively eaten at Christmas time. In Hannah Glasse's 1747 The Art of Cookery, Made Plain and Easy, which many people consider to be the first cookery book in English meant for home cooks, there was a recipe for mince pies, but no reference at all to it being a Christmas food. In all fairness to Hannah, we do start eating them as soon as Halloween and bonfire night are past us here in the UK. Or at least I do. But anyway, I think my pies might be ready, and I am very curious to try them. I'll even forget the fact that I am a vegetarian for a solid minute here, because how could I not try them? Please don't judge me. I'll get back to eating tofu tonight, I promise. Okay, here they are. And they smell incredible. They smell delicious. I'm so curious to try one. Let's see. All right, so first impressions. Well, it smells amazing. The spices and the rose water really give it a festive vibe. And, wow, this is different. Like, you get the sweetness from the fruit right away, but then the savory lamb comes through and the spices tie everything together. It is definitely a bit of a surprise, but honestly not in a bad way. I can see how this would have been a showstopper on a Tudor Christmas table. Would I make it again? Maybe not for a casual Christmas gathering, but if you are looking to impress your guests or, confuse them slightly, it's definitely worth trying. It's hearty, rich, and definitely something you won't find at the supermarket. Let me know in the comments if you would eat these mince pies and if you would consider making them at home. I was pleasantly surprised for sure. Thank you again to Brigitte Webster for kindly sharing her knowledge, and thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and do consider becoming a patron. I promise that not all your contributions will be used to buy proper mince pies, by which I mean lovely 21st century ones without meat or suet. Though I should confess that some of them probably will. So whether you're baking Tudor mince pies or enjoying the modern kind, remember, the traditions of the past are never too far from our plates. Thank you, and I'll see you next time, and I hope you have a lovely Christmas.